Hey, 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 it's Rebecca Simon Peter with Leadership Mojo. And I'm so glad that you are here today. Thanks for being with us. You know my heart. You know that I am passionate about empowering church leaders and the congregations that you serve. And I have really special guests today that I'm excited to introduce you to. But first, I want to just remind you about the work that we're up to in these post pandemic days, that we're really about forging a new path and moving the church forward in a post-pandemic world in such a way that we can overcome polarization, we can move people out of the edges into the center, dreaming like Jesus together. So, with that in mind, I'm really pleased to introduce today's guests to you. And here we go. Kind of some fancy video work here. I'm pleased to introduce you to Alex Joyner, who is the pastor at First United Methodist Church, Charlottesville. And yep, that's Charlottesville, Virginia, site of the 2017 Unite the Right rally that turned deadly. And Alex has been the pastor there since 2021. How do you like that? Moving in the middle of a pandemic. That's what Alex did. And joined by us today is Bill Clark, joining us for this wonderful conversation. Bill is somebody you absolutely want to know. He is the lay leader of First United Methodist Church, Charlottesville. He's also the professor emeritus of pediatric endocrinology at the University of Virginia and a citizen of Charlottesville for 40 years. Bill told me I've seen it all. So we're going to let you in on the conversation that we've been having. Now, I want you to know that Alex is a member of the Creating a Culture of Renewal community, having just graduated from our 3-year group coaching program that's all about leadership capacity. So a lot of what you're going to be hearing today, just a little shameless plug, a lot of what you're going to be hearing today is some really great stuff that Alex has picked up from Creating a Culture of Renewal. And he's done the absolutely beautiful, impossible thing of taking a Jesus-like dream and really bringing it to life. So I'm just really pleased to have both of you here today joining me for this special Leadership Mojo. And Alex, why don't you just tell us what the vision is that you're working with? And then we're going to hear from Bill about why this vision is so important, what happened way back on August 12th, 2017, and go from there.
Yeah, well, thanks. And thanks for opening this space up for us to have this conversation. I really have enjoyed being part of the Creating a Culture of Renewal community and look forward to continuing that relationship. So thanks for that. Yes, so we are here working with the vision statement of loving the whole city and loving the city whole, starting right here. And you can hear in that a little bit of some of the themes that we've been working with as we have come together, me as the new pastor and the church and this community. The love the whole city part is about inclusion, trying to be this church. I knew already because I had the chance to be a part of it 16 years ago when I was campus minister here at the University of Virginia. So I was returning, and I knew that one of the big values here, and I heard it again when I got here, is inclusion and being an open community. So that's a big part of the statement, is being able to see all the people who are part of our community. And then the loving the city whole part, well, that had a whole lot to do with where Charlottesville is right now and really where the church is after the pandemic. It's about healing and flourishing. So we have been focused on, and the last part of it, starting right here, is all about taking the very immediate surroundings of the church and making that the place where we begin our work and see it expand beyond this one place.
Yeah.
But should I say a little bit about where the church is located, and then maybe?
Yes, but tell us that vision just one more time.
Okay. Yeah, love the whole city and love the city whole, starting right here.
That's so beautiful. Love the whole city, love the city whole. I love that. Starting right here. Did I mention, folks, Alex is a poet, and you can hear it in his vision. Just a beautiful way with words. Well, yeah. So where is your church located? Why do you guys care so much about this?
Yeah. So, when I was here 16 years ago, one of the things that the church did every Palm Sunday was to gather in the park right in front of the church. And it was, and we gathered with other churches I think Bill was at the Catholic Church and the Episcopal Church. I think were the two that were most regular in that. Maybe the Christian Church when it was still on the square too. But all churches that were within a block of that one square block park, and we would do Palm Sunday together. But it was always a little strange because we did it underneath this huge statue of Robert E. Lee. So, it was a strange theme. It was a great event because we were getting together with these other churches and we'd go off to the churches, but it was always strange. So
now tell us, Alex, just for people who may not be clear on their history, who's Robert E. Lee?
Yeah, General Robert E. Lee, who was the leader of the Confederate forces during the Civil War in the 1860s. And so in that role, a defender of slavery and fighting to keep that institution alive.
So there you are doing Palm Sunday underneath the statue of Robert E. Lee.
Yes, a very
in the park in front of your church.
So instead of Jesus on the donkey, we had Lee on his horse.
Oh my God! Okay, I get that. So, yeah.
But it kind of speaks to the history here because I grew up not far from here, and you can't turn a corner without hearing stories about Robert E. Lee and the Lost Cause, and that's kind of what I grew up with. So I think for this, I don't think anybody had many questions about it in the white community. Had many questions about it for a long time. But that park was established at the same time as this church. This church building was built in the same couple of years as that park. So it's always been part of the same architecture. So when the city started to talk about removing that statue, it became part of a national conversation about what do we do with all these memorials to an idea that is so antithetical to justice and what we think of as a just society. And I would say, Bill can speak to this better than I can, but even within the church, there were those tensions about, what do you do with the statue? Do you get rid of it? Do you try to recontextualize it? Or just leave it as it is? That became a part of a big debate. And right-wing groups around the country, especially white nationalist groups, became kind of fixated on this particular statue, and showed up in force the weekend of August 11th and 12th in 2017. And it made the national news. Many of you will probably remember what happened that day, and Bill will talk about it more. But it left behind a great wound that we're still trying to recover from. The statue was finally removed 2 weeks after I got here last summer. So it's an empty space that is kind of crying out for some new story. And I think that's what we've been trying to do with this vision, is to say, if the healing of the city is going to have to involve healing of this place too.
Thank you, Alex, for that really powerful introduction. So here's the park right in front of the church. Tell us what happened, Bill, on August 12th, 2017. What happened that day in the park?
Well, I was the co-chair of volunteers for that day, and we decided, following a Ku Klux Klan rally in July, we decided that we would open the church as a safe place for anyone on that day. And by doing that, what we did was that we collaborated with different religious groups in the community, but also with people like the mental health people. There's a group of medical people who travel around to events and assist in helping people. The church, we had about 25 volunteers. We invited anyone to come in who wanted to come in to sit, pray, listen to some scripture, use the restroom, eat. We had food, we had water, we had mental health people there. We also had emergency medical people there. We had a tear gas shower stall out in our park. which was used. And we had a group of people who were using wands for the first time, inspecting anyone. And anyone was allowed to enter as long as they didn't carry a weapon. And we enforced that even with the security people, the police who were there. We told them that they're very welcome to come in and use the restrooms and eat, but they had to leave their weapon with their colleagues. The day was filled with different kinds of people. On the grounds around our church were fenced in, so that there was no entry like from the front of the church, because there were high fences put there, and there were state police there, and there were actually SWAT teams in front of the church that day, and on the tower, the roofs of buildings across the street from it. Early in the day, we heard people marching up the street, and they had weapons, they had guns, they had shields, and they were chanting.
Wow.
There were skirmishes on the street right beside our church before 10 o'clock in the morning. And there were gunshots outside the church.
Jesus.
It was a very, very violent situation. And there were some good parts to it. Clergy were invited from all over Virginia, but also from all over the country.
Wow.
I had the opportunity the Unitarian Church invited people from all over the country, and at the end of the day, I offered a ride to a pastor from a church in Indiana who was staying at someone's home that was somewhat near where I lived. So I took her home that day. But on our portico in front of the church, the rabbi sat and she was playing her guitar with a United Methodist pastor from several hours away who was playing his guitar. There were two Episcopal bishops standing there. It was a day where we felt needed.
Oh, you felt needed as a church.
We felt the Spirit of God moving throughout that building.
Wow.
It was for those of us who were there, it was a very spiritually moving day.
Wow.
Different from anything we'd ever experienced before. And I had people come up to me later on in the day and say, you folks really know how to do church. Oh, wow. Wow. And another person came up and said, this is what a downtown church looks like. And those are very impressive things. Unfortunately, there was a lady who was killed that day. Yeah. There was a death, and she was literally run down by one of the Unite the Right, and that was the name of the rally, Unite the Right rally. One of the people who was attending that rally. Her cell phone was found by someone one of our volunteers, and wow. It rang, and it was her brother wondering where she was.
Oh my gosh!
And then he called back about 20 minutes later and said, she's dead. I mean, this was there were just whole lots of things going on.
So history right there on your church steps.
Right there.
Right in your church across the street.
Yes. And yet it was the opportunity to do justice, not just to talk about justice. This was doing justice.
Yeah.
And to that extent, it was a very, very important day.
Yeah.
Not everyone in our congregation was happy with it.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
And a lot of those feelings ran very deep,
Mhm.
and they were somewhat political kinds of feelings,
Yeah.
and they persisted, and there was some division because of that. But I
Yeah.
think that what we're seeing right now is that now's the time to move on from that, but to build on it.
Yeah.
I
Bill,
think
thank you so much for sharing this really personal um, remembrances of what that day was like and what it was like to be church on that day, not on the sidelines, but right there, even with not everybody agreeing. And I can imagine with President Trump, then President Trump, and the kinds of things that were being said, and the kinds of policies that were being enacted, and the kinds of language that became acceptable, that it took a lot of courage for your church to move past the naysayers or the people who said, no, we don't want to touch this, to actually deal with it. Many churches, I don't have to tell you, but many churches got stopped, right, Alex? Right then. You were a district superintendent during that time. And you know that many churches got stopped and just didn't want to touch anything that was political, right?
Absolutely. It was strange. By the way, this is my friend, and he was my pastor when I was here 16 years ago, Harry Kennan, who is pastor emeritus here at First Church and still involved in our community. So,
Thanks for joining us, Harry.
and he was here on this day too.
Mm.
But yes, it was strange. I was on renewal leave that month of August in 2017. So I had gone that weekend on a camping trip by myself to the Big Bend area of Texas. So I was as far away as you could get.
Mhm.
And I heard about these going on back in my hometown. And so I made it a point to try to get to a church that Sunday. I went to a cowboy church just to see
Mm.
what, because I'd heard about them and I was,
Yeah.
exploring all kinds of things for church life. And I went and they didn't say a word about it. It was as if it had never happened. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, it was painful to think that something this dramatic could go unnoticed.
Mhm.
But also, that people were having all kinds of notions. Charlottesville became an event instead of a place, for a lot of
Yeah,
people. There's the fourth
exactly. Yeah.
to
In
Charlottesville.
Charlottesville. Yeah.
So, I felt very I felt very defensive for my former hometown. that it was being bandied about, and people had all kinds of notions about it, what it was like, and so it was painful even from a distance. But yes, you're talking about what happened in a lot of local churches, and yeah, it was. I think everybody condemned the death and the violence, but in terms of what to do about statues and
Mhm.
who to who to believe about the politics of it, it was very
Yes.
difficult.
Who to believe. And also, in the work that we do with creating a culture of renewal, we know that quite often churches, they're not in a culture of renewal. They're in a culture of regret and resignation and resistance and racism. I mean, racism and all the isms really run through churches. And I think it's one of the really challenging things about leading a community of faith, whether you're a layperson or a clergy person or a district superintendent or whatever your denomination, whatever positions those are. How do you root out the isms, love the people, and move things forward in a Jesus like way with people being people? Like, how do you do that? So, Alex, talk to us about where'd you get the courage? And Harry, where did you have the courage on that day? Like, where did that courage come from to move forward in a positive, gospel-oriented way when you know you've got people that don't agree with you or they've got, feelings about things?
Uh, yeah, that feeling is still within the church. It didn't go away with the events of August 2017. And in fact, you probably know that it didn't start there either. There was another event involving Ku Klux Klan in June of 2017, which was kind of a prelude to the big event. But yeah, even now, just yesterday in the paper, there's the story of the statue being melted down
Mhm.
to become a piece of art, uh, plows into swords into
Swords and
plowshares, that
plowshares,
sort of thing. But uh, that's not going over too well with a
Mm,
lot of people in the community and also, frankly, in the church.
Yeah, and
mm.
there's legal action to prevent it from happening too. Yeah.
Wow. Now, tell us about Vinegar Hill, just to give us a little bit of context about where the Black community is located, the white community, and Robert E. Lee. How did he get to be set up in that park, and when did that happen?
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I'll take a first stab, and you can add on. I mean, so the park was uh, given to the city by one of its great philanthropists, Mr. McIntyre, back in the 1920s. Um, and when it was dedicated, Robert E. Lee's granddaughter was here to unveil the statue. The day before, the Ku Klux Klan had done a parade down through starting here in the on the hill, and headed down into the predominantly Black neighborhood down the hill. So there was a sense, even from its establishments, that this was a way of marking the white community. I think, that this was a way of saying this area is preserved, and it was codified. There was actually called a white park, and another park was built in another part of town, Washington Park, that was dedicated as a black park, and
Mm,
it was a sign of the segregation of the times.
okay.
And then later in the 20th century, in the 50s and 60s, there was a plan to do urban renewal in the Vinegar Hill neighborhood down the hill. It had the effect of breaking up a very vibrant Black community here in town, destroying a lot of Black businesses, and it just continued the same kind of physical division of Charlottesville.
Mm. And that Robert E. Lee statue was erected when?
1923, I think, was the date. Yeah.
And the Civil War was when?
Well, but you find that with a lot of the statues that were built, that many of them came along from the 1890s until the 20s, because that was an era when Reconstruction had definitively ended, Jim Crow laws were in place, and all of those markers were a way not only of recognizing Confederate history, but it was a way of marking who's in charge again.
I've heard it, they're really about intimidation. They're just
Mhm.
about intimidation.
Yeah.
There's another piece to that too, Alex, and that is my wife and I made a point during COVID to drive around the state. We wanted to visit all the counties.
Yeah.
Almost all of the counties have at their courthouse a Johnny Reb statue.
Mhm.
Those statues were mostly, I can't speak with great authority, but they were mostly placed there in the 60s during the Civil Rights Movement.
Wow.
Okay. And right at those courthouses, very intentionally, and they were placed there by the Daughters of the Confederacy, and they're all over the South. You can drive anywhere, you can see, and they're all cast out of the same mold, so they all look alike.
Same faces.
And it was very eye-opening for me personally, and again, this whole thing. I was shocked at how ignorant I really was about the history of this area in Charlottesville. I didn't know that was dedicated as a white park until after all of this. And there's so many things I could talk all day, and I won't. But the ignorance that I have at 81 years old is absolutely amazing. And then to think back and say, but wait a minute, I never even went to an integrated school, much less learned this history. I wasn't taught that.
Interesting. And you grew up there, is that right, Harry?
I grew up in the next county over from here.
But Virginia, yeah.
Yeah, in Louisa County. Mm-hmm.
Whew. Boy, so much for us to learn and to deal with. And I think that's what's so inspiring, Alex and Bill and Harry, about this vision that the church has. Love the city, love the whole city, love the city whole, starting right here. Tell us some of what you are hoping to accomplish, and what are some of the ways you've begun to live out that vision?
Well, I'd say it's very much in process. I think it you know, there are a lot of things converging. I mean, it's the church situation coming out of the pandemic. It's the community as a whole trying to find a way forward after all of this, and it is. I think one of the things I noticed even in my early visits when I knew I was coming back here was how much the city feels different now than it did to me 16 years ago because of all the things that have gone on. Um,
Mm,
so I really feel like what we've been doing, has been to do a lot of listening and a lot of conversations.
mm,
I think the goal was to early on have. So when I first got here, a lot of those conversations were first with the church, and just to try to figure out what values the church has, what how it thinks of itself, what sorts of short-term visions might be possible for us to do in a bold way. But one of my questions was, when did you feel most proud of being a part of First United Methodist Church?
mhm.
And a great number of folks said August 12th, 2017. That
Wow.
was the day. And I heard that over and over again. So it
Wow.
tells me that it's really it's become a part of the identity for this place. But then I knew that was going on all around us. So I've been having conversations and trying to take people along with me when I do it, uh, to talk to the historical society, which is on the park, the library, the theater, the arts community. There's the haven for unhoused individuals is over there, and that's a great issue in this area. The other churches and the synagogue in the neighborhood, but also because of the geography and knowing the history, it's not just the place around the park. It's also knowing what got displaced when that park was built and how it's viewed by other sections of the community. So trying to connect with the African American Heritage Center and Swords and the Plowshares Project and those other folks who look at the park in very different ways.
Yeah.
But you asked also, what are we doing?
Yeah.
So, um, yeah. So as we've started to make the uh, moves forward, in addition to those conversations, we've tried a prayer initiative in the park. This was actually Harry's idea, was to get people in the park during the season of Lent. To
Ah,
Why don't you describe the vision for that?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what we basically did, we took the lectionary readings borrowed them from the Episcopal Church,
hmm,
and had people go over to the park. First of all, just to sit and look around. What do you
nice.
see? What do you hear? Are there people? What are they doing? And so forth.
Yeah.
And then to have the time of reading the scriptures. We had a time of prayer
Hmm.
that was both prescribed and admirable. And then we had a follow-up time where we once again sat and said, okay, what is God saying to us as a church, to me as an
Ah,
English, and what is God saying to the church through those readings,
mhm.
through the encounters that we have had in the park? Like,
Yeah.
for instance, I encountered anything from a homeless man to
Hmm,
police. You
hmm.
know, how did that feel in terms of what God might be leading us toward?
Yeah.
And I know that Carolyn has one of our members has write-ups. We all wrote up our experiences,
Hmm.
and that's going to be compiled in some form or other, and hopefully used as a part of the vision that Alex and Bill and others are leading forward. Uh,
Yeah.
it'll become grist for the mill then.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Sherry. Bill, let me ask you, what's one of your favorite that we've heard about the prayer initiative? And as this vision really gets lived into, what's one of your favorite parts of it? Either that's happened or that you're looking forward to?
Hmm. Bill, you've been involved in a bunch of studies and all, haven't you? And you may have some thoughts about other members of the church. But
Well, you know, I would like to see the church be a place where people want to come, not necessarily to worship, but to be with us. And I think in order for that to happen, we have to show up and be with them. That's a really important move that we need to make. And a lot of us are really trying to do that. And it's not always comfortable. It's not, but it is important. And I think it's very important. Now, I would like to say that I think the summer of 2017, it was sort of like ripping a scab off a wound. I think a lot of us became significantly aware of the racial inequities in our community, where if you had asked me before that, I said, hey, everything seems to be okay. You know, my son had a black teacher and they had a black friend, and you know, I don't see anything wrong. And now I see everything wrong. It's, oh my goodness, how can I fix these things? What can I do? And I think showing up is probably the number one thing.
Wow. That's so powerful what you said, Bill. I didn't see anything wrong. Now I see everything wrong. Like your whole lens changed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. When you saw the KKK marching, when you heard those gunshots, when you saw the Unite the Right come together, I mean, that changes things. In my own city, Casper, Wyoming, is a very red state. That's not my color exactly. And in 2020, we marched after the murder of George Floyd, and we marched downtown. We were led by a pastor. There was thousands of us. And when we walked into the downtown, through the downtown to the police station, where the police were going to address us and just talk about police safety and police brutality, we were met with, I would say, 20 or more, probably in a 4-block length of downtown Casper, Wyoming, what I would call vigilantes, AK-47 strapped across, right out in the open. And I can tell you, I don't think they were there to protect the Black folks. I think it was a sign of intimidation. I think it was a sign of, don't forget who's, sort of boss here. Don't forget, what kind of place this is. And it was chilling. It was absolutely chilling. And I've been involved in Black community and on many, many levels for many, many years. And it was chilling. So I get what you're saying, Bill. I didn't say anything wrong. Now it's the lens. It's really the lens through which you look at things. And when you become present to, hey, what does this town look like if you're white? What does this town look like if you're Black? What does it feel like? They're just two different things. So I would like to end our time together with, what tips do you have? Charlottesville, Casper, Wyoming, we're not the only places dealing with this, right? This is global stuff. And in the United States, especially, white nationalism has seen a resurgence in recent years. What tips do you have for church people who want to do right, who want to, love, walk with justice, walk with mercy, walk humbly with God? What tips do you have for leading divided congregations or getting past politics back to gospel? Let's hear from each of you. What tips do you have? From your perspective as an emeritus pastor, as an active pastor, as a lay leader, what tips do you have? How do you do this? Give us the good news. Dish it out for us. Give us the hopeful word. How can other churches and leaders do this in their setting?
Well, I'll start, but for all of its challenges, this is a vibrant place too, and I think it's just, we get so closed in congregations, thinking that everything we do has to happen within these walls, and we know each other very well, so we know what things to say and what things not to say. But I think we just need to get out the doors more, and I think we need to talk to people, as Bill says, show up, to be there, to add more context to our lives. Because I think, I still have a great hope for a lot for folks that, as set as we are in our ways, we all live someplace and we all interact with people every day. If we're not online, we interact with people who think funny and are different from us.
Yeah.
And so we need to get to know them on as deep a level as we can, so that we can start to build a common history. And I think, one of the things about Charlottesville is it's not hard to get us here into a conversation about history, because it's everywhere.
It's everywhere, yeah.
We talked about Monticello and all the struggles and trying to understand Jefferson and Sally Hemings and all of that. That's here, But there is, my hope is, and this is my hope for our centennial project, which, we're going to be celebrating 100 years in this building next year. I hope that that's going to be an occasion for us to retell our story and to help us retell its story in some hopeful ways. And I think to do that is going to be focusing on how do we bless the place where we are, how do we bless this?
So your tip is to get outside your front door. Churches, get outside your doors.
Every door, yeah.
Every door. Talk to people, listen to people. Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And Harry, what about you? What's your tip?
Well, yeah, I was working on a sermon today. Believe it or not, I'm serving as an interim at another local church, just about a mile from here, actually, and I'm working on a Pentecost sermon, a Pentecost sermon. And yeah, easy for me to say, huh? But one of the things that strikes me is the whole idea of Peter and the others going out and speaking in a language that the people understood.
Yeah.
Okay. And in order to do that, it works the other way too. We have to learn to understand the language of the community and what it is saying to us, and before we have any authority to speak back. So there's that whole idea of listening to where you are, listening to the vibe of the community before you jump in and start solving issues.
Yeah.
You have no right to solve because they're not, you don't understand. And so that would be my comment is it's a two-way street there to speak the language of the people, but you have to understand their language before you speak it.
Yeah. And before you even try to solve a problem or bring a team together, you have to hear them.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Harry. Very, very helpful. Well, Bill, you get the last word here. What's your tip as a lay leader and a longtime member of the church? What's your tip for hope?
Well, as a long-term member, one thing I want to do is not make the past too important. I want us to be able to leave the past and to think about the future. It's the now and the future that we really need to deal with, and look for unique situations and opportunities that we can all be involved in.
Wow. What a great set of tips. So get outside, leave your building, get out any door you can, go into the community, hear what people are saying in their language, learn their language, and don't try to solve any problems before you actually have really heard from people, understand where they're coming from, and don't have the focus too much on the past. It's really the present and the future that ought to concern us. Even longtime members who carry a wealth of history know that we need to look to the future. So, wow, what a great conversation today. I thank you for the wisdom that you've shared, the history, the heartfelt feelings, and the memories, and most of all, your beautiful, beautiful vision of healing a wounded community. Love the whole city, love the city whole, starting right here. I just love saying that, Alex. I know it's your vision. I just love saying it's so powerful. And I think that almost any community could find something for themselves in that kind of vision. So thank you so much for being here today, and I really appreciate it. And thank you to all of our folks that have been listening and watching and will watch this later. Really appreciate your presence here on Leadership Mojo. And this is usually 15 minutes, but this was a power pack 30 minutes of experience, strength, and hope and wisdom from people on the front lines of justice and mercy and reimagining a future out of a wounded past. If you're interested in having more information about how do you create a vision for your community, for your church, I want to invite you to a couple of resources. One of them is the book right over my shoulder, Forging a New Path, Moving the Church Forward in a Post-Pandemic World. And the other is to check us out online at cultureofrenewal.com, where you can learn more about the program that helps you really cast a big, bold vision and bring something brand new to life. So thank you so much for joining us. I'll see you next week on Leadership Mojo, where we will have more oomph for your leadership to help you lead in divided times to bring people to a brand new place. Thank you.